this is Arlene.
Hi, this is Gowri.
And together with us is Azmil Taib. You are currently now in Australia, right? Hi, Azmil.
Hey, hi. Hi, Gowri.
Hi, nice to meet you.
And you are currently now in Australia. Am I correct?
Yes.
In Canberra.
Yes,
How are you?
I am. Pretty good. Yeah, not too bad. I think spring is here, so it's not as cold as it was. So,
And
which is
Azmil,
always
you as the lecturer of University Science Malaya, you are currently pursuing your PhD.
mm-hmm.
And
Yep, at the Australian National University here
Amazing.
in Canberra.
Amazing.
Oh, I'm from UM too. That's great.
And no, I'm from USM.
USM. Oh, well, I'm from USM too.
Small world. And today you're going to speak about a topic which is part of your thesis research.
Mm-hmm.
And it's regarding on Islamic schools, where you research Islamic schools in Malaysia as well as Indonesia. Hence our topic today, Islamic schools, radicalisation or spiritualism. So to start off, perhaps a bit of your background and your thesis studies.
My background is I'm currently a lecturer at University of Science Malaysia in Penang, but I'm on a study leave to finish my PhD here at the Australian National University in the Department of Political and Social Change. So my PhD research is on Islamic education in Malaysia and Indonesia. Mm-hmm. So specifically, I'm looking at how the state, but by that I mean the national government, so the Ministry of Education in Malaysia and the Ministry of Religious Affairs in Indonesia formulate policy regarding Islamic education and how they implement the policy on the provincial and local level.
Go
ahead.
Why was this chosen as your area of interest?
Well, I mean, I started out as researching on Indonesia. I mean, that has always been my specialization, I guess. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's because I've been researching Indonesia for 10 years now. So I did my master's thesis on Indonesian politics. So it's only for the PhD I started to do to add Malaysia into the research as a comparative, to give a comparative dimension. But I spent a year living in a pesantren in an Islamic boarding school in rural Kalimantan. Mm-hmm. And that actually kind of got me interested in doing research about Islamic education.
Right.
So I think it's. I mean, I didn't really have much before this, so like in Malaysia. But I think Indonesia is much more vibrant. The Islamic education there is much more comprehensive. And
when you say comprehensive, what do you mean?
I mean, comprehensive meaning, there are tens of thousands of Islamic schools from kindergarten all the way up to university level.
Mm-hmm. So it's much more systematic in terms of the Islamic education is being structured.
Yes, it is. It's much more systematic, and it's a big part of the national education system. And there are different types, and most of them are actually private.
I see. Interesting.
Yeah.
When you say private, which means the curriculum are not being, I would say, formulated by the government, or is it something that something that has only been endorsed by the government but not formulated by the government?
No, I mean they follow the curriculum formulated by the government. I mean that's a requirement if they want to be part of the national education system, and also for the Islamic school graduates to move on to the university level. I mean but they have a lot of flexibility when it comes to interpreting the curriculum, or implementing it, or adapting it to the school's own particular culture, or the region's own political, cultural values and stuff like that.
Are the Islamic education in Indonesia caters to all sects of Muslims, as in like Shia, Ahmadiyya, and also the larger Sunni group?
Yeah, that's kind of, that's a bit hard to answer, because like Shia and Ahmadiyya is not recognized in Indonesia. I mean, they're not banned, but they're not. I mean, so that they have this limbo status in Indonesia. So they're not legally banned by the government, but they're also not recognized as one of the Muslim sects. So in a way, I mean, that kind of open, but they're ostracized, at least socially ostracized. So there are a lot of violence being acted upon them, upon the Ahmadiyya communities and the Shia community. So even though I'm sure there are schools. I mean, they have home schools, or maybe but it's not really well publicized, and they probably want to do it underground, to avoid undue attention. So I would say most of the schools in Indonesia, Islamic schools, are Sunnis, but it can range the whole ideological gamut. So it can be, there are progressive schools, and there are ultra-conservative Salafi schools, and there are they're called the integrated Islamic schools, called Islam Terpadu, which is conservative, but it caters towards well-off Muslim upper middle class professionals, and so there are all these different types of schools, but they're all Sunnis. Yeah, so I think this is the same case in Malaysia as well.
Do the government of Indonesia observe or monitor the schools, the Islamic education there?
Yes, yeah, they do. I mean, the Islamic schools usually fall under the jurisdiction of two ministries. So there's the Ministry of Education and Culture, and there's the Ministry of Religious Affairs. So anything that has to do with Islam, with religion, I mean, that's the jurisdiction of the Ministry of Religious Affairs. And then for the other parts of the curriculum, the secular part, the general part of the curriculum, that actually falls under the Ministry of Education and Culture. So there's always confusion, and sometimes cross, there's some turf fighting as well, no, not fighting, but because, I mean, it makes it even more complicated by decentralization.
I see.
So Indonesia went through a massive decentralization effort in 1999. So after they democratized, after Suharto stepped down in 1998.
They give more power to the provinces, to the governors of the provinces.
Yeah, to the provinces and sub-provinces, so the district, they call Kabupaten.
When you say they decentralized, meaning that in the education sector, how much of power or stake does the provinces or the sub-provinces governors have?
it's most of usually the central issue is about funding, right? So before, during Suharto time, during the authoritarian New Order regime, everything is centralized in Indonesia. So everything has to go through Jakarta. So the local governments, the provincial governments, the district government, they didn't have much power. So when the decentralization laws were passed, and now a lot of the decision-making process, especially when it comes to financial matters, being devolved to the provincial, to the local level. So now they get to decide how much they want to fund the school. And they get more control over their natural resources, for example. But yeah, there are like certain sectors that were devolved into the local area, and some of the sectors are still maintained with the central government. And this is the problem with Islamic education in Indonesia, because the matters of religion actually still remain with the central government. So that religious matter not part of the decentralization. So only education matters were devolved to the provincial, to the local level. So when it comes to Islamic education, and there's like this contradiction going on, because one part is central, one part is local. And when it comes to funding, because a lot of provincial government, they don't want to fund Islamic schools because they see that as a responsibility of the central government. So they rather spend their money on other schools or on other things. So a lot of Islamic schools, they complain like, oh, we don't get funding from the provincial government. And then the central government doesn't have much money because there are so many Islamic schools and they have very limited resources. So it caused all these problems, yeah.
I see. I'm just wondering, right? Your research is based on the 3 levels. One is national, another one is provincial, and the third one is local. And you also have area specific of studies. The one in Malaysia, it would be Selangor, Kelantan, and Sarawak. And the ones in Indonesia would be Banda Aceh, Kupang, and Depok.
Yeah.
From all these areas that you have done your research and studies, in terms of the way Islamic teachings are in all these different areas, are they the same? Do they convey the same message about Islam, or do they vary from places to places?
Definitely vary. There's no homogenization when it comes to the Islamic education curriculum, as much as the ministry wants it. But I think it's more so in the case of Indonesia than Malaysia. I think there is more centralization effort and more homogenization effort in Malaysia as opposed to Indonesia. I think part of it is Indonesia is vast. It's huge. You have 17,000 islands that spread across the ocean, and it's difficult to have a streamlined, homogenized system, implemented all across the archipelago. But in Malaysia, you can see efforts by the Ministry of Education to kind of impose its will. But in Indonesia, there are a lot of influence of local culture and the school's culture itself. So, for example, in Aceh, and Aceh has always been an interesting case in the context of Indonesia, because it's part of.
They are an independent state, right?
They're not independent. But they have broad autonomy.
Mm-hmm.
So they've always been. So they've been in the struggle against the Indonesian government since the 50s, and then there's a ceasefire, and then they were given a special autonomy status in 1959, and then they rose up against in an armed struggle against the Indonesian government in mid 70s. And then finally, they have the peace agreement in 2005, so a year after the tsunami. And then after that, they were given. So there's a special autonomy law just for Aceh in 2006. And so basically, Aceh is it's not independent. I don't think that's on the agenda right now. It used to be, but I don't think it is right now. Maybe there are some people in Aceh still longing for independence, but I think the overwhelming majority of Acehnese wants to stay with Indonesia, but still maintain that autonomy.
When you say it has an interesting perspective on Islam, or the way it educates its citizens on Islamic studies, maybe you can share more on that?
Yeah, I mean, Aceh has always been known as Serambi Mecca. Right, so the veranda of Mecca.
It's like Kelantan.
Like Kelantan, yes, exactly. Both claim. So I don't know which one is the authentic one, but yeah.
So probably you have to go directly to Mecca to have the authentic one.
Yeah. But Aceh has always been for hundreds of years been the center of Islamic learning. And Islamic kingdoms, right? And they have their own pondok system as well, like the traditional Islamic school that has been in existence for hundreds of years.
And you can find it in Malaysia as well,
you can find it in Malaysia. Yes, of course. You can find it in Kelantan, mostly in Kelantan, in Kedah, in southern Thailand. But the difference between the traditional Islamic school in Malaysia and the traditional Islamic school in Indonesia, especially in Aceh, it's it's actually thriving in Aceh as opposed to in Kelantan, for example, which is sort of kind of dwindling down, so being eclipsed by national school or other types of modern Islamic schools. So, but Aceh has always been very proud of its Islamic identity. I mean, they always look at themselves as, Indonesia is an Islamic country. But it's an Islamic Muslim majority country. But Aceh always seems like it's more special in that sense, compared to that, So because they fought against the Dutch, it took the Dutch 30 years to actually to subdue Aceh. So and then because when they fought the Dutch and they used Islam as a rallying, unifying identity, to unite people against the infidel Dutch army. So that really kind of strengthened their Islamic identity, so, and that get carried on until today. And even when they were fighting against the Indonesian government, also they see themselves as being,
it's an Islamic struggle, is it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Is that what they say?
So Aceh always see itself as being this unique Islamic enclave, within this Indonesian territory, and that it wants to, to be able to implement, to carry out its way of life, its Islamic way of life, regardless of whatever's happening, whatever the Indonesian government wants to do. So it wants, so right now, like Aceh, part of the autonomy is, like they have their own Sharia law system in over there, so they pass their own laws, you call kanon, so so they have all these things that
so it's
are
very specific when it comes to the way they understand Islam, and also they put it in high regards compared to other provinces in Indonesia.
Yeah, I mean, because they see Islam as being an inextricable part of their identity, so and it has to be put into practice. It cannot be just something that you profess, but nothing that is not part of your lived experience, so they want to be able to implement that in their daily lives, so which means like the Islamic schools and the Sharia. I mean, even if it contradicts the goals, the objectives of the national government, because they see that this is Aceh, this is particular to Aceh.
They have a special, I would say, responsibility on for them to move forward in terms of their Islamic identity and agenda. So, Azmil, we will have a short break, but when we return, we will discuss more on the Malaysia part of the Islamic education.
The voice of sharing, Durian ASEAN.
Hey, this is Arlene.
Hi, this is Gowri.
And we are back with Azmil Tayyib to discuss a topic regarding on Islamic education. Is it for spirituality or for radicalization? So we continue our discussion regarding on Malaysia's education system when it comes to Islamic education. What do you see based on your thesis studies and research?
Oh, that's a really broad question.
You can narrow it down.
What I see in Malaysia is it's quite an interesting dynamics, because on one hand you have the federal government, the Ministry of Education, and also JAKIM. So there's actually a small department within JAKIM that deals with Islamic education as well, that tries to, like I said, homogenize or centralize Islamic education in Malaysia, which actually, as maybe you know, that Islamic affairs actually fall within the Sultan's or the state's jurisdiction in Malaysia, right? So the Islamic affairs and Malay affairs are actually the prerogatives of the Sultan and the state, individual state. So it's not part of the federal government's jurisdiction.
I see.
So Islamic schools and a lot of Islamic schools in Malaysia are actually part of the state, so not part of the federal government. And so that causes some kind of, that there's a tug of war going on, so between the state and then between the federal government, because the federal government wants to centralize, wants to exert more control over Islamic schools, but at the same time the states and the schools themselves, they want to maintain their autonomy. So as the federal government in Malaysia always has the perception of being a very strong state, so, and we can see how like the federal government can willingly impose, its will on, whatever it is. But when it comes to Islamic affairs, or in this case, Islamic schools, it seems like it has to walk on a tightrope,
Why
So,
is it? Why you describe it like that?
Um, the reason I say that is because, on one hand, you have, there's this need for control, to get everyone, all the schools in line, especially when it comes to private Sekolah Agama Rakyat, so SAR, which is independent Islamic school, small Islamic school, founded by the community, and especially in Kelantan, Terengganu, these are all known to be the hotbeds for opposition, for PAS. So there were the cases back in the early 2000s, when our former Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad tried to crack down on the Sekolah Agama Rakyat because of perceived radicalism, But at the same time, it's not a full throttle crackdown because on the other hand, Islam, they want to perceive as not being anti-Islamic, because Islam is part of the you want to be seen as because Islam is part of the the identity of the state, of the government, because you don't want to see cracking down on Islamic schools, and you can be seen as being secular or or worse anti-Islamic, which is not good for the image of the federal government. And it only plays into the hands of the Islamic opposition PAS. So, but at the same time, the federal government wants to maintain control. So that's what I mean by walking this fine line, this tightrope. So
I'm just wondering why, in the case of Malaysia, religion or Islam, in this sense, has become a political mileage or a political game, and Islamic education has been somehow being exposed to political support by either the opposition or the government. But in the case of Indonesia, it is totally different. It doesn't have any connection to whoever is supporting which political party or whatsoever.
Well, it just, the both dynamic, the dynamics, the same dynamics exist in both countries, in Malaysia and Indonesia, but just the different in the extent, in their role in shaping the politics, I guess. Like in Malaysia, ever since the Islamization wave, Islamic revivalism in the late 1970s until now, so the state has been, the federal government has been involved in this Islamization process because it sees that Islam as part of the, this part of its, I guess it's part of the competition against the Islamic opposition, so it needs to beef up its Islamic credential, and then by trying to out-Islamicize, the Islamic opposition. So so I guess it, and then trying to shape the Islamic narrative, the Islamic discourse, to fit its agenda, so that people would see that there is no contradiction between Islam, the faith, and the objectives and the government, so because the narrative, the counter narrative from the Islamic opposition, from PAS in this case, is that the UMNO government is not Islamic or not Islamic enough, it's a secular government, so there's a counter Islamic discourse that the federal government wants to neutralize, I guess, so it wants to shape it into its own favor. So that means taking control of the school and shaping the media, the discourse, right? So that it will reflect. So whatever it is, when it comes to Islam, it would reflect the government's point of view, and so there's no contradiction. But in Indonesia, it's Islam is not so much part of that the national politics itself. I mean, but it does get instrumentalized. It does get exploited. So for example, during the Jokowi's presidential election,
Prabowo actually, if I'm not mistaken, during the presidential election, Prabowo actually spoke a lot of sentiments on religion, especially Islam.
Yes. Well, yeah. I mean, he did actually, or rather, his people. So. I mean, they did use accusing Jokowi as not being Islamic enough, or because he's Java. I mean, Prabowo is also Javanese, but because they say like, oh yeah, I mean, he's like typical Javanese mysticism, sort of, so it's Muslim, but he's also incorporated a lot of the Javanese spiritualism in its faith, the syncretism, syncretic belief. And so there it does get played, and then also I think the Prabowo campaign did one of the dirty campaign tactics that they engaged in was to distribute some kind of like a newsletter, or like a called Obo Rakyat. So and then to all the pesantrens, and then to Islamic schools, especially in the rural area, and then with all the news that pretty much saying that Jokowi is anti-Muslim, anti-Islam, like he's actually Chinese descendant from Singapore or something like that, or he's a puppet of the Zionist Jews and the American puppet, and like all kinds of stuff,
I see.
So they're trying to spread this thing, I mean, but this Obo Rakyat, this newsletter were only distributed in Islamic schools.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so in rural Islamic schools, it was distributed, and then finally after like somebody raised this issue, and then it became a controversy, and then stopped, but the damage was done, so so that was so I mean, Islamic issues, Islam does get does have some kind of role in Indonesian politics, but not so much because, as in Malaysia, because the government doesn't depend on Islam to.
I'm just wondering, is there a diversity of viewpoints or worldviews when it comes to Islamic education in both countries, Malaysia and Indonesia?
I think, yeah. I mean, at least from my own observation, I mean, it's definitely more diverse in Indonesia.
Why is that so? Why Malaysia do not have that sort of diversity?
Well, I mean, part of it is just the this Islamization efforts that have been going on since the late 70s. I think we have more diversity before that. So I think in the past 40 years, so you have this effort towards Islamicizing the Malaysian society, so and this very conscious effort by the federal government to Islamize, the Malaysian society. I mean, you can see, so, and that actually, and the trend is actually towards a more conservative type of Islam, so it's basically a like trying to impose an orthodoxy, So, and the definition of orthodoxy is that, there can only be one interpretation of the faith. So it cannot be, any other competing interpretation or versions of the faith. So it has to be, it has to monopolize the discourse. So, and that's what has been happening in Malaysia in the past 40 years. I mean, even with the opposition past, the Islamic opposition as well. I mean, in terms theologically speaking, I mean, there is not much difference between the two. I mean, except how they interpret the Islamic teaching to suit their political agenda. But theologically speaking, I mean, in terms of the beliefs, they all very conservative. So I mean, I think that's that trend, in the past 40 years, I mean, it has shaped the kind of Islam that we see, the Islamic discourse that we see in Malaysia right now.
So has international events or changes, for example, in the Middle East or in other parts of this world, has shaped the way Muslims in Indonesia and Malaysia view religion, and hence how it view how its Islamic education should be?
I think in Indonesia, for example, there are a lot of the Islamic schools, especially in pesantren, the Islamic boarding school, like the equivalent of pondok in Indonesia. So they incorporate subjects such as human rights or democracy.
Oh, they do?
Yeah, they do, yes. So,
do they have that in Malaysia? Like human rights education within Islamic education?
None that I'm aware of. I mean, but then there are so many Islamic schools, but I'm not aware of any subjects like that being taught. I mean, in Islamic school, much less in the international schools, right? So,
in fact, I think there's one time a particular ulama or minister said that human rights education is not Islamic. Yeah,
because I mean, we hear this in Malaysia all the time, right? So yeah, even our Prime Minister Najib Tun Razak came out many times saying that human rights, all these things, these are all Western invention, Yeah, so it's not compatible with the Malaysian culture, the Malaysian way of life, the Malaysian worldview. So it has a stigma, So, but so I mean, it's kind of hard. I mean, so I doubt that there is actually a subject that actually talks about human rights and democracy and stuff like that. And
within Malaysia, like Selangor, Kelantan, and Sarawak, all these three probably have different social classes and different way of life. How different they are in terms of Islamic education in Selangor, Kelantan, and Sarawak?
Yeah, it's an interesting question actually, and it actually goes to the heart of my research because I'm looking at there is a specific reason why I chose these three disparate areas because I mean first Kelantan is like Aceh is known to be Serambi Mecca, right? So the strong Islamic identity. And then Selangor, and the place in Selangor that I chose is actually in Bangi. So
pretty middle class place.
Yeah, Bangi Inshallah, so which is known to be middle class or upper middle class Malay Muslim professionals, but known to be conservative. So that is that kind of demographic that I'm interested in. And also Sarawak, which is a Christian majority state, and also it's multi-ethnic. And so, I mean, for me, it's interesting to see the kind of how would Islamic education thrive within this this kind of environment, this Christian majority being a minority, because in the Peninsula Malaysia, Islam is a given, like it's part of your, like it surrounds you, so you don't think twice about, you take it for granted in a way, because it's part of your life. But in I guess in Sarawak and in Sabah, you have to be conscious about your standing in the society, being a minority. So I'm kind of interested to see how that plays out, especially when it comes to Islamic education.
So diversity really helped to, diversity within population really helped to contain any forms of radicalization within any particular religion. Seems that.
Yeah, yes, I would say so, because especially being, like for example in Sarawak, because I think because it helps being a minority, and then you have to, first of all, you have to adapt to the prevailing way of life there, so which is more fluid, less rigid, more tolerant in a way. So you cannot be ideologically stubborn.
I like the word ideologically stubborn.
Yeah. So there are like I've talked to people at the state education office, Jabatan Pendidikan Negeri in Kuching, and they say, we have, because they have shortage of teachers, especially Islamic teachers, Islamic education teachers, from like local Sarawakians. So they have to get these teachers from the peninsula, from Semenanjung. So a lot of teachers came from Semenanjung, to Sarawak to teach, and they, people come with preconceived ideas, like they have their values, but after a while they adapt, because they say, like this is the way here, and they, especially when they marry the local here, the local in Sarawak, and then they start to change their values and to adapt to the ones, in over there, so they become less rigid.
Yeah.
But it's,
That's very interesting as well, Taib. Unfortunately, we are short of time. We have to stop now, but I hope to discuss with you more on all the different aspects of Islamic education, as well as the Muslim communities in both Indonesia and Malaysia. Thank you very much, Azmil.
You're welcome. It's always nice talking to you guys, and Gowri as well.
Welcome.
Okay.
Bye. See you. Bye bye.
All right. Yep. See you.